Well, hey everybody, we're live. I'm kind of in a new location. We filmed here before, but my normal office setup at the office where I work has changed because I made a change in company since the last time we did this. So, um, getting set up into a new routine. Right now, I'm at home, cozy next to the fireplace because it's December and it's cold outside.
Yes,
And Brenna's at her title office and she doesn't have a fireplace.
I know. Bummer.
Yeah. All right, Brenna. So it is the holiday season. Tell me, what is your least favorite Christmas song?
I think you asked me this last year, but I really don't like the I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas, but our son likes it, so it makes me like it a little bit more. But I really don't like 12 Days of Christmas.
Okay. Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I think I did ask this last year. So I'm nothing if I'm not consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
For me, it's still Frosty the Snowman.
I know.
Uh, that's a very, very overplayed song in my head after so many years working in a retail environment where it was 3 months straight of Christmas songs. That's the
And
one
there's
that
so many
just like,
versions of it.
yeah. They could have stuck with one and made it a whole lot shorter and just never played it again.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So, real estate. Yeah. What's happening with our, Ray Mondragon's watching. He said Little Drummer Boy is the worst.
My brother would agree with you, Ray. He hates that song. So, yes.
Uh, I heard this, right? And as newer parents, right, can relate. But um, the last thing that a brand new mother wants, right, as she just gave birth, is a little kid coming to play the drums for her and her baby. Really the opposite of what she's looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so the market is continuing to shift. Brenna, we're having interesting conversations with sellers, interesting conversations with buyers. I think a lot of people are a little freaked out still, um, but it feels like things are starting to stabilize. So, and you talk to a lot of real estate agents in your job as a sales manager with Land Title. So, what are some of those conversations like as you're connecting with the real estate agents?
Yeah, I think people are, we kind of talked about this stalemate that we were at, especially earlier in the summer, where the sellers weren't really ready to concede to this new normal. The buyers were still addressing to or adjusting to these higher interest rates, and we're kind of at this stalemate. So, for the most part, sellers have kind of realigned their expectations. And we're seeing more appropriate pricing. So that is okay. But then we have some of the seasonality that is historically very consistent, especially in the Denver metro market. But for the past 2.5 years, has almost been non-existent. So, we're trying to remember what that feels like Q4 coming into the holiday season, that a lot of people, if they had a choice, are not choosing to sell their homes right now or not choosing to buy their home right now. So we are seeing some of that seasonal slowdown. And with that, a lot of conversations about sellers saying, hey, the market's going to pick up. We're going to have another great spring. Let's just wait to sell our homes until the spring. So, it's kind of a two-sided coin. I think it's always a good time for someone to sell, and it's always a good time for someone to buy. Um, will interest rates come down a little bit? Maybe in the spring. That's kind of what we're hearing. Will there be more buyers in the market? Probably. However, more buyers, more sellers, more competition. So, depending on the location and the state of your property, you may not want as much competition. If your home isn't in the perfect location, or maybe needs a little bit of work. And something we've talked about probably for years now is there's less buyers in the market right now, but typically the buyers that are still in the market are more motivated to get to the closing table. So you may have less showings, less offers, but bottom line, it doesn't matter how many showings and offers you have if you have kind of finicky buyers and you keep dropping contracts. So if you have a dedicated buyer, they're committed to getting to the closing table. All it takes is one. So kind of depending on the strategy on the buy side, I think, if you've been sitting on the sidelines for the past couple of years, unable to compete, yes, you're competing with some higher interest rates right now, or dealing with some of those interest rates, but you're still in a position where those sellers may be willing to contribute to your buy down of your interest rate. You can talk to your lender about that 2-1 buy down or 3-2-1 buy down or whatever. And still have a little bit less competition. Whereas, if the interest rate, it's this teeter totter, because if interest rates come down and prices come up and more competition, you might be net positive or net equal or net negative, just kind of depending on that situation. So, trying to outtime the market, outsmart the market is always a gamble, but I think there's a definite opportunity right now for buyers where they don't have to throw the kitchen sink at the deal. They don't have to exhaust their cash resources. And they may still be able to get a home in the payment closer to what they like, because those sales prices haven't taken off again for our spring selling season.
Yeah, interesting. And you shared with me this maybe a couple of weeks ago, but because your company, Land Title, is the number one market share for title in the state of Colorado, you see a lot of contracts. And in the contracts that you see, an overwhelming majority have seller contributed money to buy down the interest rates for buyers.
Yep.
So this isn't something that we're just, hey, we're talking about, maybe this is something that could work. We're talking about this because this is something that's happening in a big scale right now in our market, to buy down that interest rate temporarily for the first 1, 2, 3 years, whatever that looks like. Let somebody else buy that down for you.
Well, and I think a lot of people, when I first heard about it, I was like, why would the seller ever want to do that? But when you crunch the numbers, it actually, in some situations or in a lot of situations, can be more lucrative for the seller to do that instead of reduce the list price. And obviously it helps the buyer because of that temporary buy down of the rate, with the anticipation and hope that interest rates will drop prior to 3 to whatever years from now. So it gives you that savings. So sellers really, truly, this is kind of a win-win in some situations. If they're looking to get their home sold but don't want to lower their list price, you're shopping based on your payment and not necessarily what that sold price is. And it can just be a win that we're really seeing happen a lot.
Yeah, and this is a different piece than what we saw people getting into trouble with because they didn't understand with adjustable rate mortgages, right? Where they get in, but the interest rate varies, but it could go up a max amount and can go up quite a bit. This is if my interest rate's 6, it's bought down for the first year or 2 or 3,
Yep.
But it never goes above 6, right? You're locked into that. So if interest rates go to 12,
you're still
I'm still at 6, right? It doesn't matter. So it's not following what the Fed does with the interest rates on the mortgage side, right? You're not going to end up beyond what you already know that you could do.
Yes.
Yeah. So very, very straightforward, very safe deal, right? As I've learned more about this, I think, Brenna, the next time we go to buy a house, right, let's put that in there, right? And take advantage of what that looks like in the market to buy.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a great strategy right now in the market currently.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dive into the numbers. Let's add in, and I'm going to let you drive. What were the actual stats and data points that made up our real estate market?
Yeah, so this is our first snow stats. It comes out on the first of the month. So this came out on the 1st of December. This is talking about November data. So something that I think is interesting, and again, we've talked about this a little bit, but some of these numbers, like what it's telling us, is not necessarily how it totally feels, because I think anytime we have a change, things stall, people freak out, good, bad, any kind of change people don't like. So we're feeling it, and it dramatic change, to be sure, as far as where we were 6 months ago. I was in a business building class yesterday, and the guy gave a really good analogy about the market. And it's like, okay, we've been running up the stairs for the last 2 years, but at some point you can't continue to run up the stairs. And he's talking about, not inflation necessarily, but appreciation. We've had double-digit appreciation for years. We can't sustain that. So for a second, you have to pause and catch your breath and then resume walking up the stairs. So we had that pause, if you will, in maybe July, but now we're continuing to kind of walk up the stairs. So year over year, we still anticipate to see at or above the historical average, which is around 5% for Colorado. So nationally, it's 4% appreciation year over year, but Colorado, we're a little bit higher, so we're like 5.5, 5.6 historically. So more than likely, we'll probably continue to trend in that arena instead of 19, 20, 21. But let's not forget how much anyone liked that. It was not sustainable, huge affordability issues. So don't be too quick to forget the negative side of the market that we've been in, and just kind of appreciate this more consistent, sustainable return. It's not even normal, but just consistent that we've seen. So, with that, our average close price is still $729, which is up 4.8 from this 4.8% from November of last year. So I think that's really surprising to a lot of people, because we get a lot of this, the sky is falling, we are losing all of our equity. The blue line is our 2022 number. So you will see, if you purchased in spring of this year and you had to sell your house today, you may have lost some value. But that happens most years. It's a little bit more dramatic this year, but it happens most years, that if you buy at the peak of the season, you had to sell 3 months later, you might not have equity. Now, the last couple of years you have, but again, that is not something that we all anticipated would continue for long term. So very, very historically normal as far as, kind of that seasonality.
Yeah. And I would anticipate we're going to see the first 6 months of the year next year that the year over year appreciation is lower, right? So if you bought in April of 2022, and we look at this, we're having this conversation April 2023, I think it's going to show a loss. I think as we get into the latter half of the year in the last 6 months, that's where we're going to see, well, we're appreciating around that 3, 4, 5% mark. Because of how high we were and how fast it inflated, that balloon shrunk a little bit, but it's still going to be growing here over the course of the 12 months. I just think early on, if we look in that appreciation next year for the first 5, 6 months, we're going to see that number specifically just be a negative number in the, oh no, I lost equity.
Yeah. Well, and if you look here, the red line below there is 2021. So if you purchased in June of 2021, when everyone had to bring a ton of cash to the table, a lot of times, you're still up from that, right? It's just that last kind of peak from this year that it might take a little bit more time to recover from. But, last year, every year for the last couple of years, we've been saying, man, we can't top this market. This is the peak. This is the peak. This is the peak. And even with that, even with all of that crazy appreciation, we're still above it this year, even with the flattening. So just kind of keep that in mind. Matt, you always say that real estate's never a bad investment as long as you can pay your mortgage payment, right? It's cyclical. Yeah. Even people that were part of the bubble in 2008, a lot of times, if you could hold on to that, I mean, you bought in 2008, right? And that ended up being a thing for you. In this class I was in yesterday, they also mentioned that in 2008, so the Great Recession, Colorado only lost, I think, less than 5% of their equity in their home, which obviously then in the years past it's like 200% up. So we're not in the same state that we were in 2008. It's not even the same market. And even then it only dropped 4%. So that was just a nice little bit of perspective when you're kind of looking at what's to come and maybe what's happening overall.
Yeah, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling. I think consistently, Brenna, our message is that Chicken Little doesn't know what he's talking about, right? That's not actually what's going on, that the data doesn't support it. And as we look back in history as to the elements that created the housing market collapse, the bubble to burst, if you will, those are not the same elements that we're dealing with here.
Right.
And in a lot of recessions, houses don't decrease in value. Now, that's not they never do. That's in many times where we see recessions and GDP fall, housing values don't end up plummeting at the same rate, right? We still have generally appreciation in our real estate market.
And to your point about 2008 and the things that are different, one of the major things is supply. We reached over 30,000 homes on the market in Denver Metro during 2008, 2009. And we're still at 5,800, 5,900. So, we're down month over month. We're about 20%, and we're up 72% year over year. But that is honestly healthy and a good thing. At the beginning of this year, we had 1,100 homes on the market. We had about 10 days worth of inventory, and that is not something that we want to repeat. So, yes, it was a quick climb and it's coming back down a little bit, again, that seasonal curve. But this is one of those supply and demand, basic economics. We're in a very different atmosphere here we still don't have enough inventory.
Yeah. And I think as with that inventory levels, so supply, demand, right? That's what drives economics. It's economics 101. I think if we're having the same conversation again, let's futurecast into early 2024. So let's skip 2023. We're going to see this early season of 2022 where it went up and then dropped as really a false summit, right?
Yeah.
It looked like the peak and then everything was dropping. Well, guess what? Here we go again. We're going to continue to climb.
Yep. And I think you'll see that I have a slide on actually the other one that shows kind of that year over year appreciation and kind of those false summits. But the overall trend is still positive, kind of like, like I said, walking versus running up the stairs. You're still getting there. It's just at a slower pace. Gives you some time to catch your breath a little bit.
I think the ones that were sorry to jump in there, Brenna, but the ones that were, I think, impacted the most right now with the way that things are going are the flippers.
Yeah.
Right. The individuals or institutions, right? Zillow got into this, your Open Doors, right? They're buying and trying to turn and quickly sell it. The last couple of years, that model was really beneficial for them because they could buy it. And in 3 months, the market had gone up so much that it hit a lot of, maybe errors in their calculations when they bought. Now, right, the flipping is the market stabilizing and declining a little bit. Those are the ones that are need to be extra careful as they buy. And some of the articles and things that I read with Open Door, the massive losses that they're seeing as a company, it's the flippers are the ones that I think that are hit the hardest, during what's going on right now.
Yeah, and it's one of those for if you're a flipper or life happens or whatever, and you have to sell quickly. Historically, you always kind of anticipate, like, I'm probably going to lose money on this if I have to sell it really quickly. It's not normal to have $60,000 worth of appreciation in one summer, but that's what we kind of got accustomed to. So it's just readjusting, rebalancing our expectations. And getting back to the cycle that is healthier and sustainable. So like I mentioned, active listings were at 5,900 and the new listings. So just a quick recap, active listings on the 1st of December in Denver Metro, 5,900 homes. If we looked 3 days later, it's going to be a slightly different number. New listings are all the homes that came onto the market for the month of November. And that was 2,500. So that is down 30% year over year and about the same 30% month over month. But you can see very consistent with the trend lines as far as, like we talked about at the beginning, if you have a choice to sell your home in summer or freezing cold, dark winter, which one are you going to choose? So there's some of that. And again, that's not surprising at all that those numbers are down.
Yeah, I heard this years ago. Two things get planted in the springtime: flowers and real estate signs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that's when most people want to move. And to be honest, that's as most real estate agents get out of their winter hibernation and get back to work, right? So there's that. But, you mentioned this early on in our conversation today. Buyers that are looking to buy right now in the holiday season need to be in a home, right? They're in a position they need to be moving. Sellers that are selling right now probably need to sell, right? Yep. That nobody's just like testing this market.
Right.
Like, well, if they throw enough money at me, I'll move.
Well, and to that point, as far as testing the market, I think that a lot of people got away with testing or pushing the pricing, and maybe not feeling that as much, because even if you overpriced your home, you still were either getting multiple offers because there was so little inventory, or maybe you're getting 20 grand over instead of 40 grand over, but you're still, 20 grand over, so you don't care. Right now, the importance of pricing is very important. It's very at the forefront of what we're talking about right now, because buyers are still extremely aware of value. They know that the market has shifted. They have more options, and they're just going to wait. They're going to wait for you to bring your price down. So really just making sure that you put your best foot forward the first time out, and that's with staging, with photos, with repairs if they need to happen, pricing within this market, not within the summer market, not with what you think is going to happen in the spring or what your neighbor got. Pricing right now in your neighborhood, pricing within that market, that's still going to net you the most money most of the time. So, kind of as like you said with the flippers, they got away with some calculations. I think some sellers got away with being a little bit more aggressive, and that's just not the case right now. So it's very important to just understand your market, do a market analysis, and price correctly.
Yep, be ahead of the market. Don't be behind the market. If you're behind the market, you're going to lose as you chase it down.
Yep. Pending listings or under contract, we're down year over year, and it is a little bit slower than even 2019, which is that green number. And I think this is where we really see people's hesitation to change, right? They're just really unsure about what's going on, the state of the economy, outside the real estate market. Milk is more expensive, gas is more expensive, Starbucks is more expensive. So they're just figuring out what they can afford, what they want to do, and it just makes people pause. But again, we do anticipate that will start to trend up. Typically, we hadn't seen things really tick up until like February or March. Obviously, in like 21 and even 22, it started pretty quickly. So we'll see how quickly into 2023 things kind of rev up. How long it takes to kind of get out of that holiday fog, as I call it. I remember in 2019, it was most of January that it was a little bit slower, and then it kind of took off. And then it just seemed to get shorter and shorter. So I would anticipate that January maybe isn't going to be off to the races, but pretty quickly thereafter, we'll start to see more activity, more homes come on the market, more buyers enter the market, and then our under contracts will go back up.
It's odd here in Denver. It follows the Broncos schedule. When the Broncos are done playing, expect the real estate buyers to get out into the market
Well, they're
and
going to be
start
done early this
buying
year.
homes.
So,
Yeah, they still get their 17 games, but they're not going to be playing meaningful games. They're not playing meaningful games right now. I can't tell you how many Facebook posts I'm seeing where people are selling their Bronco tickets.
yep.
I don't think I've ever seen this mass like, hey, I'm trying to sell these tickets. But yeah, when they're playing meaningful games late in the year, buyers are watching the games, right? So they're not out. There's a correlation right there. As soon as the Broncos are done, buyers start coming out to look at homes.
The last slide on this one that I wanted to share is just the month supply of inventory. So talked about it a little bit before, but the National Association of Realtors says that a balanced market would be about 6 months of inventory. Here in Denver, it's closer to 4. If we can remember back to January and February, we were at like 10 or 11 days of inventory. So what that translates to is at the current speed of the market, if no more homes went on the market, how long would it take for our inventory to dry up? So January, February, it was 11 days. Not awesome. Now we're at about a month and a half, which this is one of those where if we're looking at 1.5 and it's supposed to be 4 months to be a balanced market, anything above that being a buyer's market, below that being a seller's market, you would venture to guess we're still in a pretty strong seller's market. But because of the sharp incline, it really feels more like a buyer's market or even maybe more closer to balanced, even though the numbers aren't saying that exactly. So, and that's just part of that change. It's a shift of power. And I think that's why we're feeling it a little bit more. But, we still need more inventory for the amount of buyers we have in the market is kind of the bottom line there.
Yeah, not enough homes. I don't anticipate that changing because the desire for home ownership would have to really change. And I don't think that's something that we're going to see. I think we've just, this is what we do as Americans, right? We buy and own real estate. I don't think that's going to change that desire. So because of that, the supply is way behind where it should be.
Yep. Will you pop to the other slide deck?
You got it.
I'm not going to go through all this, but I do want to show average sold price. So this is kind of what Matt was talking about. So you can see kind of these peaks and valleys every year. Obviously, this year it is the most dramatic. But I wish I had like a laser pointer, but if we were looking, so this goes from 2019 forward. So if we looked at the rise or like how quickly things were appreciating 2019, 2020, it's kind of like this. And then 21, 22 go like this, right? And then we came back down. If we were to follow that normal rise from 2019, 2020 and draw a line, we're still above it. So yes, we're down. I think, Matt, you made an analogy about like poker, right? If you want to share that analogy.
Yeah, well, poker or blackjack or going to Vegas, whatever you do is you gamble. For you gamblers who are watching. If you go to Central City and Blackhawk or Las Vegas, right? You're gambling. You walk in with $100. That's what you walked in at. And a couple hours, you're up to 500. Well, that's great, but we're having fun, right? There's some bad advice that you never walk away from a heater, but so you stay, you continue playing and you're down to 300. Well, you're still up $200, right? Yeah. You weren't as high as you were, but overall you're still sitting pretty good, right? You tripled your money and that's a pretty good position to be in. When you look at that, you're not going to go broke by making a profit. So it's there. And as we look at this graph, there's a number of false summits that we've come to. And I think
we lost him talking about false summits. But while he's out, if he is going to pop back on, we are down $12,000 month over month. Which is about a 1.68% change. But year over year, we're up about $30,000.
Hey, I'm back.
You're talking about fall summits.
Yeah, the internet kicked me out. It said something went wrong. I was like, oh no, the whole thing just went. But yeah, for Brenna, it looks like you continued on. Um, yeah, the the fall summits, anyways. I think for some people they've got the PTSD of what happened in the housing correction, the bubble that burst. They consistently they're just going to say that this is it. It can't get any higher. This is where it's going to crash. This is where we peak out, and that's just not what we're seeing, and we don't anticipate seeing it.
Yeah, and we had some good news this week from the Fed that we're moving the needle a little bit on inflation. So maybe they'll stop raising interest rates. Maybe, who knows?
Maybe.
But at least we're trending in a positive direction. So we can take that into the end of the year and moving into 2023. That Denver is more insulated than a lot of places uh, in the country because we have diversified industries. It's desirable. It's nice weather. Sometimes the Broncos are good. We have a lot of things going for us that make our real estate market strong and even stronger than the nation on the whole. A lot of times, so you can take that to the bank.
Yeah, don't forget the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Colorado Avalanche, right?
Yes.
As you talk about the reasons why Denver's awesome. So, I think if I were to boil down to this, my tip, right, is you're at work around the water cooler, and the know-it-all who's telling you that this real estate market is crap and things are bad, you can tell them, hey, Matt and Brenna said you don't know what you're talking about. They've got the data that backs it up, right?
There was still someone in January at the water cooler saying that the market was crap and that it was bad and that you shouldn't enter it. So it's like I said, it's always going to be good for someone. It's always going to be bad for someone or less good for someone. It really depends on your strategy, your situation, and a lot of other factors. So
yeah,
can't make everyone happy, but I think for overall stability in our real estate market, we're trending, going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's healthy. I think for some of this, it's a welcome sight. It is like somebody pulled the ripcord as fast as we were just going, and we've got that parachute that's now slowed us down. Well, we're still in that same direction of appreciation. Unlike skydiving where you're plummeting down, right? We're going up and somebody pulled that ripcord and we're not going up as fast. So that's a good thing overall for what's happening. And I think right now is a phenomenal time to buy. I think we'll see February, March is where things are going to start to shift again, more towards the seller's market. That's my anticipation, is that's what we're going to see. I think we've got 2 months where I feel fairly confident that you can still get some pretty good deals if you negotiate right.
Yeah, interest rates aren't going back down to 2-3%, right? So they might come down a little bit, but prices are going to go up. So your payment's still going to be higher in more cases if you wait. So that's kind of that 2 to 3 months of golden time if you've been on the fence, if if the conditions of the market haven't worked for you in the past, it might be the time to have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're considering getting into the market, or you were on the fence and you kind of stepped off to the sidelines, I say let's grab it, go. There's a lot of great properties on the market right now, and deals to be had, which we haven't seen in a very long time.
Right.
So, cool. Well, as always, Brenna, I really appreciate you and Land Title and putting this data together so that we can geek out, talk about the numbers, what's happening in the real estate market, and be that source for folks as they look at what's real versus what's being sensationalized. And over exaggerated.
Absolutely. Well, I love diving in. Happy to help, happy to chat. And I cannot believe that we are in the middle of December already.
10 days from Christmas.
Yeah.
10 days. Is your Christmas shopping done?
No.
No. Have you started?
Well, yeah.
Then you're ahead of me.
Yeah, I know.
No, that's perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in. And we've got more information in the data as next month we'll get to look at 2022 as a whole as we recap what happened as we get into the new year. So for those watching, you have a happy holiday season and a wonderful new year.
Happy holidays. We'll see you guys in 23.
All right. Bye.